I am a sister, and soon I'll be a mother, and I think that I can really stand out and make a difference.
Heidi Bailey, thanks so much for coming on to Talk Beliefs all the way from your home in Oakland, California. You grew up Mormon in Boise, Idaho, but left your faith at 15 after questioning the beliefs of the church. You got in touch with the show because you want to speak out about the impact of the Mormon church on young women. So how are you doing, Heidi? You grew up in Idaho, which has the second highest concentration of Mormons in the world. So I guess California must seem like almost an entirely different planet, wouldn't you say?
Well, thanks for having me. Yes, it is quite different. Oakland is one of the most diverse cities in the country, and Boise is very homogenous. Idaho's beautiful, but it's a lot of people who are the same, and I never really felt like I fit in there. So even when I visit now, I kind of feel like I'm holding my breath. And then once I get back to Oakland, I feel like, okay, I can breathe again. So quite different, but I've definitely found my home here. So I'm happy to be here.
Well, before we go into your experiences growing up as a young woman within the mainstream Mormon church, also known as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or LDS Church, let's just hear a little bit about your early life. Now, you were born into the religion, isn't that right?
Yes, that's right. So I was born in the covenant, as they say, which just means that my parents were sealed in a Mormon temple prior to my birth. So we're sealed as a family for all eternity. Well, we were, but I'll get to that. So my mother converted when she was a teenager. She had a lot of trauma in her early life, and I think that the church offered her some sense of safety and love and community that she didn't have elsewhere. My father's parents converted early in their marriage. My grandmother was raised by very poor migrant farm workers, and she lost her favorite brother at an early age due to a tragic accident. My dad's father was raised in an orphanage. He had a lot of siblings, but they were all adopted out to different families across the country. And he stayed behind and was raised in the orphanage until he left at 16. So both my grandparents had really tough lives. And I think that they were probably both drawn to the promise of an eternal family that the church offered. So that's just a little background as to, I think, how my family became involved with the church. My parents met, and while they met as teenagers, they got married when they were 19 in the Los Angeles temple. They started having a family right away. I'm the youngest of 6 children. My family is very devout, Orthodox Mormon, and they even, my dad was actually bishop when I was a child. So, you know, my parents, they got married when they were 19, started having a family. So they didn't have anything more than a high school education. My mother didn't work. She stayed home to raise the children. And so my dad often had to work several low wage, minimum wage jobs to keep food on the table. But then he also got called to be bishop, which in itself is an unpaid full-time job. So he wasn't able to be around a whole lot as I was a child because of all of his responsibilities.
So what is it that Mormon teachings say concerning women and girls, and how is it different for the boys in your family? Were there any unspoken expectations?
Yes, definitely. So the Mormon religion puts a lot of emphasis on gender roles. And in Mormonism, there's only 2 genders. We know that that's not actually true, but there is a whole spectrum of gender. But in the Mormon religion, there is male and female, and they're taught that both have their own individual worth and specific roles in life. So and this played out both culturally and in doctrine. So there's a big, type out if there's difference between expectations and actual teachings, there is. So, doctrinally, things might be one way, but culturally, things might be another way. So, one example of that, just how it presented in my own family. My grandparents that I talked about that converted early in their marriage, they had 3 girls and 6 boys. So big family, lots of laundry and housework and stuff to be done. But the boys were not allowed to do any of the housework. So my grandmother would complain that she had just 3 girls doing all of the laundry, dishes, cooking, cleaning, sewing, all of that stuff for 11 people. And the boys, their only chores that they could split among all 6 of them was taking out the trash and doing yard work. So my grandmother would kind of complain about that, and my grandfather would really push back and say, girls have their jobs and boys have their jobs, and the boys need more time anyway to work on their studies because they'll have to get an education and form a career and support a family one day. The implication being that girls will not.
Yeah, it's very black and white, isn't it?
Very black and white, yes. Yes, very heteronormative, black and white type of thinking in the religion, both culturally and doctrinally. Again, that's just my family. Other families may have been different, but not in my experience. So at least not where I grew up. So yeah, really different gender roles. And part of that goes to, boys have the priesthood, which basically means that if you're a righteous young man, God talks through you. So priesthood holders, they get the priesthood when they're 12, and they're very revered. And a woman's job is to find a worthy priesthood holder and support him and raise God's army. So if it's okay, I just want to read a couple of things that might be helpful to put this in the context. So I also, want to say that the church has changed quite a bit since I left. I left 17 years ago. So this is pulled from when I was a teenager in the church. In 2003, there was a general conference talk given by and for those of you who don't know, general conference is this huge church meeting that happens twice a year, and Mormons all over the world tune in to watch it. So the general young women's president of all the church, gave this talk, and in it she said, "In the eternal scheme of things, the most crucial and fulfilling thing you will do is to build a holy home and rear a strong family in love. In your youth, you formed habits of praying and reading scriptures. Capitalize on those habits, as well as the skills you learned of cooking and budgeting. With your righteous desires and your homemaking abilities, you will build a home that is a haven of peace and a fortress of strength." All right, so that quote gives you kind of a good overview of what the expectations are. We also had a young women's theme. So girls enter young women's when they're 12 and through the age of 18. And every Sunday you recited this young women's theme. And I think that it's changed also since I've left, but this is the one that we read when I was in young women's. And I no longer have it memorized, so I'm gonna have to read it. It says, "We are daughters of our Heavenly Father who loves us, and we love him. We will stand as witnesses of God at all times and in all things and in all places, as we strive to live the young woman values, which are faith, divine nature, individual worth, knowledge, choice and accountability, good works, integrity, and virtue. We believe as we come to accept and act upon these values, we will be prepared to strengthen home and family, make and keep sacred covenants, receive the ordinances of the temple, and enjoy the blessings of exaltation." So, there's nothing inherently sinister there, but there are a few that when you dig into them more, specifically divine nature and virtue that puts a really heavy weight on girls, I believe. And also, to be clear, these expectations are put on boys as well. So it's not that girls are the only ones who have it tough, but this is, it's a very high demand religion. But this is just my experience from a female perspective. And then one other thing I just wanted to read here is at that same general conference, the second counselor in the first presidency, so basically the number 3 head honcho, James E. Faust, in 2003 said, "It may be that your most significant, everlasting achievements will be your righteous influence on others, that your divine feminine inner beauty and intuition will find expression in your quiet strength, gentleness, dignity, charm, graciousness, creativity, sensitivity, radiance, and spirituality. Enhance these sublime feminine gifts. They will make you appealing and even irresistible as you serve others as the handmaidens of God." So that kind of gives you an idea of what culturally women are supposed to be in the church. So, you know,
it sounds like they think that women are going to eat it up, but it's actually kind of insulting and it's well condescending. Yes.
Yeah, I thought so too. So, you know, I've always been very curious and strong-willed and opinionated, and those are not traits that are associated with femininity in Mormonism. It's this, you're supposed to be delicate and, you know, pious and charming and holy and all of these things to become irresistible to a righteous priesthood holder. And this, you know, I also think it's a little unseemly that an elderly man was saying this to a group of 12 to 18-year-old girls, but that's a whole other thing. So yeah, this was very much the expectation that I was raised in, the culturally. And then, you know, of course there's more practical things too. For instance, like boys got to go out and do camping and hiking and all this like fun outdoorsy things. And for instance, the women, the girls, I remember doing silly things such as we learned how to take old sour cream and cottage cheese containers and repurpose them into embroidery hoops, because that's a very important life skill. We also had one mutual activity was learning how to dress for your body type. We had activities that where we had to like do a meal plan for a large family on a budget. You know, we did quilting, all sorts of things that were considered like wifely duties. So it was just the activities were very different. I felt like I was trained from a young age to learn how to sew and cook and do all of these things that were expected of me. Yeah, education wasn't really emphasized for girls. I'm the first woman in my family to go to college. It's almost like, yeah, you can go to school, that's great as a girl, but you're going to get your MRS degree is kind of the joke culturally that people had. It's like you go there to find a husband, and then once you find a husband, you can drop out. Same thing kind of goes for missions. This has changed since I left, but when I was in the church, girls couldn't go on missions till they're 21, whereas boys went when they're 19. Now, I don't know what the doctrinal explanation of that was, but colloquially, at least in my community, there was a lot of jokes made about how, you know, the only girls that went on missions were ones who couldn't find a husband. And by the time they're 21, which is like, you're practically an old maid by then. So, you know, the girls who went on a mission, that's why the age was different, because they're expected to find a husband by then. Now, I don't know that that's actually what the church intended, but that was definitely the understanding that I had growing up. So yeah, just very different expectations for boys and girls, and really trying to make them both fit into a mold that a lot of people just don't fit into. So that was my experience growing up in the church.
Well, age 14 is a very significant age within Mormonism. You can finally perform baptisms for the dead as well as other church activities. But it was especially significant for you because this was when you started questioning your beliefs. Isn't that right?
Yes, this is when I really started to take a harder look at the church and how I felt about it and my place within it. So yeah, at 14, like you said, it's a significant age. You can start doing baptisms for the dead, which I don't know if your audience knows about that, but if not, look it up. It's interesting. So you can also start going to church dances. You can't date until you're 16, but you can start going to dances at age 14. For me personally, my parents, to celebrate my 14th birthday as a significant time, took me to a trip to Salt Lake City on my 14th birthday to see all of the church sites. So yeah, it's a big time. It's also when you're starting seminary, is another thing. But right around this time, I started questioning things. And the thing that first got me questioning was this idea of a woman's divine nature and her role in life.
Yeah.
And that just did not seem fair to me. So I really wanted to have an education and have a career, and it didn't seem fair to me that all these boys got to go and have jobs and careers, and my only option in life was to be a wife and mother. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with choosing that for yourself. I think that's probably the hardest job you could have. And so I have so much respect for people who choose that. But my problem was that it wasn't a choice for me. It was very much an expectation that I have a lot of children and that I don't work outside the home. And that was just, I couldn't grapple with that. That was so hard. I felt all this intense guilt for not wanting to have a bunch of kids, for not prioritizing marriage over an education. I felt like I was wrong, like there was something wrong with me. So that's kind of what started the questioning, that it just inherently felt wrong. And, around that time also, my sister, who is just the loveliest human, she wasn't married until I was around age 14. She was 27. Now, in Mormonism, that's a big deal. You're a spinster at 27. So when you turn 18, you go into the singles ward for all the single young Mormons. But they kick you out when you're 25. So if you're not married by then, you're too old for the singles ward. You have to go back to the families ward, and good luck getting married. So my sister received so much pressure from my mother, from other people in the community to just get married already. You're being too picky, just pick one. But she wanted to hold out for somebody who she loved and trusted and can see herself raising a family with. And she was kind of punished for that. And if I saw how much it really hurt her and how sad it made her. And, she has a lovely, wonderful husband now and a beautiful family. But that kind of trauma from her early 20s to her late 20s until she finally got married, that was hard for her. That was really hard. It was also further complicated by the fact that she ended up not being able to conceive. And in Mormonism, you're supposed to have a lot of children. And that was something she'd always want to do. It's all she ever wanted was to be a mom. And she couldn't. So she felt a lot of depression and shame and guilt around her circumstances in life of not meeting the expectations of what a woman is supposed to be and do. Also around this time, my other sister, I have two sisters, she had previously, a good faithful Mormon girl, got married in the temple when she was 18. Well, unfortunately, she married someone who was not kind. He was an abuser. And she ended up divorcing him, which is very controversial. In Mormonism, it definitely brings shame on the family, so to say. People definitely judge you for being divorced. But she divorced him and got out of that marriage. Well, later on, she met this other man who was in the church, returned missionary. They got engaged. They wanted to get married in the temple. Well, and this was news to me. In order for a man to get married in the temple as many times as he wants. So if, his wife dies or if he gets divorced or something, no problem, he can get married again in the temple. A woman, however, if she gets divorced, she has to request permission from both church leadership and from her ex-husband, and have that permission granted to get divorced and get remarried in the temple. And it's not easy for a woman to get a temple divorce approved. And that kind of goes back to this whole idea of polygamy. The church says that polygamy no longer is practiced. Well, that's true. It's not practiced in this life, but polygamy is very much practiced in the afterlife. So a man can have lots of wives, but a woman can't have more than one husband. So it was this thing that really just didn't sit right with me, because I started thinking like, oh, so a woman can be in this horrible abusive relationship, be really traumatized, have the courage and the strength to get out of that relationship, find someone else who's wonderful and treats her with dignity and respect. But when she dies, she's still going to go back to that abuser because that's who she was sealed to in the temple. That felt so wrong to me. And it really made me concerned. So that happened when I was 14 as well. Also, right around this time, I learned that I had an uncle that I did not know about. And I quickly learned that the reason I probably didn't know about him was because he was gay. And it started me questioning a lot about the homophobia in the church, because that's something that never felt good to me. I also remember around this time, Idaho's very white and Mormonism is a very white religion. But I remember a girl in my young women's class, well, not my class, but she was in young women's at our church, and she was engaged to be married to a Black man. And I remember there was so much gossip around it in the church. And I remember asking my parents, I'm like, what's the big deal? He's nice. He treats her well. Like, who cares? And my parents gave me this lecture about how interracial marriage is never a good idea. So there's a lot of racism within the church, but they don't call it that. So, what racist says, hey, I'm racist, but it's very much an unspoken truth. And I remember that never sat right with me. And I didn't know anything about the CES letter. I didn't know anything about the Blacks not having the priesthood until the 70s. I didn't know about any of that. This was just an inherent feeling I had of this doesn't feel right. So, and I'd always had questions about the science aspects of it that never made sense to me. The incongruencies with Mormon teachings and with actual data science, that always, there's all those incongruencies too. So I think that all of those thoughts just started circling through and coming to the forefront. And eventually, I spent a whole year just suffering in silence. I would remember praying and just trying to force myself to believe this is true, because I knew that I was terrified of what would happen if it wasn't, and if I left, because the church envelops every aspect of your life. And there's so much pressure put on you to stay in the church, because if you leave, you're breaking up your eternal family. At least, even if you don't believe that, your family believes that. So it's just a really painful process. And I definitely did not want to realize it wasn't true. I wanted to be a faithful Mormon. But I just eventually got to the point where I didn't even believe in God. I was like, none of this feels right to me. It's not who I am. And I couldn't bring myself to keep doing it, to be something I'm not. So, yeah. So I came out to my parents as atheist when I was 15.
You were 15 when you came out as atheist to your parents. So what was their reaction to all of this? And what happened in the days and months that followed?
Well, they weren't happy. I experienced what I can only describe as an intense sense of betrayal. I know that sounds dramatic, but that's definitely how I felt. I knew that my parents obviously would not be happy about this at all. But, you're kind of raised to believe that parents have unconditional love, and it's their job to protect you and love you no matter what. And, for who you are. That's, what we're always taught growing up. And I quickly learned that that's not always the case. At first, there's a lot of yelling and crying, but then my father didn't speak to me for a few weeks, just kind of pretended I didn't exist. And then when he did, it was a lot of, well, which one of your friends made you think this way? Like, who corrupted you? Was this the liberal education system? Like, what, like, who made you think this way?
Couldn't possibly be you reasoning your way out, could it?
No, not at all. It's not possible that I, especially as a woman, could form my own independent thoughts about things. So I find that incredibly insulting and hurtful. Yeah, so that was really, really tough. And he also did the whole thing where he takes a watch apart and then says, what are the chances if I threw this up in the air that would all come back together perfectly, as a way to like disprove evolution and the Big Bang Theory, I guess. The whole, like, so many people believe this to be true. A lot of those arguments kind of came to be. He also mentioned that when he was a teenager, his oldest brother said that he didn't believe the Book of Mormon was true. He didn't even go as far to say that he didn't believe in God, and their dad kicked him out of the house, which I took to mean that he thought I should be kicked out of the house at 15, but my mother wouldn't allow that. So I stayed in the house, and I'm still not sure that's a great thing because the next few years were really challenging. But they also made me go see the bishop, which is a pretty common thing. And, bishops in the Mormon religion, they're just regular people. They don't have any specific training. There's no like theological counseling, social work training that goes into it. My bishop at the time when I left was actually my high school chemistry teacher. And, so I'm 15, I'm sitting alone in a closed office with this middle-aged man who teaches chemistry and driver's ed at my high school. And, he's trying all those same tactics to reason with me. I also remember he kept telling me, I just need to pray about it. First off, as if I hadn't spent a year praying and crying about this, trying to force him to think it was true. But also I kept telling him, like, I just told you I don't believe in God. Who am I praying to? Like, just didn't make sense to me. But then another thing he said, that I don't remember all the details of that interview, but I do specifically remember one of the things he told me was that I was too pretty to leave the church because I would be a temptation to otherwise righteous young men, and that I wouldn't have God protecting me from unrighteous young men. So he didn't explicitly say it, but what I took that to mean was that if I didn't have God protecting me, I would be raped, or I would draw others, men, away from the path of God.
So they want you to be irresistible, but not too irresistible.
Exactly. Yes. You're supposed to be pretty, but not too pretty. So, yeah, and it's just like really disturbed. And I remember even at the time thinking, I'm 15. Like, this is so inappropriate. But it just goes to, and I actually have one more quote I just wanted to read, again from a 2003 General Conference from an elderly male leadership to young women, that says, "Furthermore, the Lord says in the Book of Mormon, I, the Lord God, delight in the chastity of women. Those who engage in physical intimacies with someone outside of marriage are likely to suffer feelings of guilt, as well as deep emotional and physical hurt. Intimate relationships between men and women outside the bounds the Lord has set bring great misery, shame, degradation, and unhappiness to those involved." So that's kind of the law of chastity is very big in Mormonism, and it's ingrained early on that all this catastrophe is going to come. It's kind of like the sin next to murder is premarital sex. So like I kind of see where he was coming from that mindset, but I would argue that it's not premarital sex that causes all of those feelings. It's the expectations that the church put on you that causes the misery and the shame and the guilt. And, when I was in my 20s, I was raped, and I didn't report it, and I felt intense guilt and shame. And, I don't think that it happened because God wasn't protecting me or anything like that. But I can't help but think that the church's intense focus on chastity and virtue and morality led to those intense feelings of guilt and shame I had when someone else did something bad to me. So I think it's just really damaging, the impact that has. And yeah, continuing through my high school years, it was just so hard. I knew that it would hurt my relationship with my parents coming out to them as atheist, but I didn't expect it to destroy the relationship. Yeah, so it was a tough road.
Sadly, you no longer have a relationship with your parents, but still maintain a relationship with some faithful LDS family members. I know your journey post-Mormonism has been a challenging one with ups and downs, but you're now living your life on your own terms, following your own unique path. So is there anything particular you'd like to say about your transition out of Mormonism?
Sure. So, like I already mentioned, it was hard. It was real hard. But, and there are a lot of things I wish I knew that I know now. When the path I took was I ended up getting heavy into addiction. And, I'm sober now, 4.5 years clean and sober. But when I was in recovery groups in Idaho, I started noticing that there were a lot of other ex-Mormons in these groups. And it come to find out it's very common for people who leave high demand religions to end up in addiction recovery. And I also found out that there were all these ex-Mormon support groups, which I had no idea about. I was a child when I left. I was 15. And I was very much on my own. I didn't have support. I had to figure it out by myself. And to be honest, I'm still dealing with coming to terms with the different ways that I've internalized my experience as a girl in Mormonism. And still trying to break down those barriers, and it takes therapy, it takes support. I've recently found some wonderful support groups for people who are just, you don't have to be ex-Mormon, you can be still in the church, but maybe trying to figure out your place in it. Yeah, so it's, I think I personally put my transition on hold. Because of my parents' reaction, I had a lot of anger towards the church, a lot, for a long time. And I didn't want anything to do with it. So I didn't, I still actually haven't read the CES letter, or I didn't know about all of these things that came out about the church and the history, because I just didn't want to be a part of it. However, it's hard to not be a part of it when you want to maintain relationships with people who are still in the church. And this is something that I still struggle with. I have very fond feelings for my sister. She is still very devout. She's one of the best humans I know. But it is challenging to, even though she's so kind and loving and accepting, that I know as an ex-Mormon that I'm considered by the church to be an apostate, which is the worst thing you could be. So, in Mormonism, they don't really exactly have heaven or hell. The Mormon version of hell is something called outer darkness. And it is, much wailing and gnashing of teeth is how it's described. And you're there with Lucifer and the sons of perdition for all eternity. And the only people that go there are apostates. And everyone else, even, child molesters and rapists and murderers, they'll go to the celestial kingdom, which is the lowest level of heaven. So I was raised to believe that if you have the gospel, if you have a testimony of it, and you deny it, that makes you an apostate and you'll go to outer darkness. Now, some people have different views of that. Some people say, oh no, you'll actually go to the celestial kingdom, which still you're there with Hitler, like so just knowing that someone I love so much and who I know loves me deeply thinks that I'm at best going to spend eternity with horrible people who did horrific things in this life, or at worst, that I'm even worse off than those folks. That is so hurtful. And it's just really hurtful. And I think it's probably, we haven't had a conversation about this, because I can't imagine any good outcome of that conversation. But I'm sure it's hurtful for her as well, from her perspective. I'm also a member of the LGBTQ community, and I grew up in a very homophobic family. And even though the church has it's changed drastically its tune on homosexuality since I was in the church, but even still, they say that the only acceptable way to be gay in the church is to either be celibate for your whole life or to be in a inter-orientation marriage. So be married to someone that you're not attracted to and have children with them. Both of which seem unnecessarily cruel, in my opinion. And so knowing that, again, that somebody who loves me and cares about me thinks that those are the things I should be doing with my life is really harmful and hurtful to both of us, again. So, I want to just make clear that my critiques are not of Mormons. It's of the system they're a part of that I believe causes both believers and non-believers a lot of harm.
Heidi, you feel very strongly about the damage that is done to girls and women within the Mormon Church. So, if there are any Mormon women watching this right now who are questioning their faith and perhaps feeling a little bit unsure, what advice would you give to them right now?
I just want to say to you that you are not broken. You have been subject to a broken system. You are perfect just as you are. Please do not try to contort yourself into a mold that someone else made for you. It's not worth it. And even though you're feeling alone right now, know that there's a whole community out there just waiting and willing to accept you with open arms, just as you are. And if nothing else in your darkest times, just remember that I love you. I don't know you, I may never meet you, but I promise you that I do love you. I see your worth, and I am so excited for whatever the future has in store for you.
Well, it's a very powerful story, and I definitely want to commend you for speaking out about this very important topic. I will leave links to your social media as well as to support groups in the description below, and all that's left to say is thank you very much indeed, Heidi, for coming on to Talk Beliefs.
Thank you so much for having me.